everyone, my name is Evie Pine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are doing a follow-up video to something that I discussed a few weeks ago, which is how to spot a fake dom. And this time we are going to be looking at how you can spot a fake submissive. And this is really interesting because in my approach to spotting fake doms, I was coming from the assumption of people that are primarily online, that are legitimately not doms, not really into BDSM, that are using the language and the labels as a tool to get sexual favors and nudes and things along those lines. Whereas with fake submissives, I don't think that they are generally fake in the same way. Like, I'm sure there are still people that are just using the title and the words with legitimately not thinking that they are subs at all, and they're just straight up lying. But what I see more commonly is it's people that are just really deeply confused about what it means to be a submissive, having healthy boundaries, being able to separate porn and fantasy from reality, and then just messing it up the whole way through. And so what I want to look at, kind of understanding that I'm using the term fake in a little bit of a looser way, is 10 ways that you can observe somebody's behavior to decide whether or not it's worth engaging with them and that they have a healthy understanding of how to be a submissive before going into a deep DS relationship with them. And also, do they genuinely actually want to be submissive, or maybe do they not even understand that like there's a difference between bottoms and submissives as well? Because I think that is something that contributes to this, is people get confused between being a bottom and a submissive, and they don't realize that there's an option. And so they call themselves something when maybe a different term fits better. But that's a whole other conversation. Let's go ahead and get into the convenient internet-friendly numbered list with number 1, which is a little something that I like to call a cold call. And it's basically what it sounds like if you have been a publicly kinky person anywhere online, FetLife, Twitter, Instagram, probably TikTok, I don't know. If you're online anywhere and you are kinky, you have probably gotten messages like this, which is somebody from out of the blue just starts a message with like, "Oh, please, dear mistress, allow me to worship your feet, and please allow me, your humble slug, to lay before you as you walk across my back with your 6-inch high heels." And then it keeps going, and you're like, "Look, I'm a submissive. Why did you message me this message? Like, what's going on here?" Just listen. Do not engage with these people. Sometimes they are just people that are really confused about the differences between porn and contacting a pro dom and just messaging random kinky people online that aren't pro doms, and they're really confused. Also, they typically are just looking to masturbate. To be honest, they are just getting their rocks off, and they're not really that concerned about the person on the other end of the line, which means you. So just block, mute, ignore it, do whatever you want to do, but don't engage, because people that do this do not have, 1, a sense of boundaries, but 2, generally aren't looking for anything outside of maybe a little bit of kinky role play, if that. And number 2 is forcing titles right away. You can already see that in the example that I gave for number 1, but this is a really big red flag on both sides of the DS spectrum. With fake doms, what you will see is they will try to establish power right away by being like, "You must call me Master Big Dick Jimmy," or blah blah blah, or whatever else. And they do that to kind of create a sense of authority and like invite you into the DS without really a lot of negotiating or talking about it first. What will happen with fake submissives is they will refer to themselves, typically in derogatory terms that like you did not negotiate for. Like, "I'm sorry, I don't want to refer to you as like my limp dick slug slave. Like, I didn't ask for that." And they will also address you with titles that you didn't ask for. Things like mistress are really, really common. Actually, a lot of pro-doms, a lot of femdoms, not really into the term mistress, as it turns out, because usually that has a connotation of adultery to it. And they will just use terms that you didn't ask for, and they don't really care about what you want. They just make assumptions. And so this is going to be a really key initial clue that they do not yet have a robust understanding of boundaries, or that they even need to negotiate before they get into things like power play. Number 3 is they quickly try to make everything sexual. Just like with fake doms, a lot of fake submissives are primarily motivated by their own sexual pleasure. But rather than like asking for nudes, things like that, they will instead insist on doing things like sending tribute. They will ask you to command them to do sexually oriented things. They will send blackmail of themselves in compromising sexual positions that you didn't ask for. They may also try to reorient what is a normal negotiation conversation into completely sexual areas, really fixating on things like chastity and orgasm control and CBT and having their specific fetish needs met, rather than going over important things like what the dom's boundaries are, or the use of safe words, or even their experience level. They may also be really pushy about doing things in public, like being forced to wear a sissy maid uniform while they go to the grocery store. Rather than respecting you as the dominant, though they may do a really good job of role-playing a subservient hot mess, they are really focused on what gets them off. They're not really treating this like a collaborative experience where like doms are also allowed to have their own needs and wants and limits. It's all them all the time, and this really, really signals that they're not prepared for a true DS relationship. They're really just into it for their own self-centered reasons. As they may like to say that it's all about wanting to serve you, but here's a really big hint if you missed this before. It's not service if the dominant doesn't want it. Now, having sexual motivations as the primary driver in wanting to do BDSM is perfectly fine. It's very, very common. However, you should be able to keep your head on straight and negotiate from a place of wanting mutual pleasure, wanting both people to be satisfied, versus acting in a very selfish and self-centered manner. Number 4 is the I don't have limits / I have no boundaries fake submissive. If you take anything away from this video, dear God, please let it be this one, because for some reason there are people out there that do insist that they have no limits and no boundaries, and those people are not typically safe people to play with. And I think where this comes from is when people are first entering into BDSM, they're trying kink for the first time, they believe that the way to impress a dom is by being as pliant as possible and doing whatever it is that the dom wants. And that is simply not the case. As this also has the added bonus for them that they have to do zero introspection about what their own needs and wants are, which they think will allow them to simply coast through a relationship and coast through scenes without having to be an active participant. And some people get submission confused with being passive, which is not the same thing. As well, the concept of having no limits as a whole would be a red flag that somebody is possibly lying about their experience, because the only people that I know that say they have no limits are people that are brand new to BDSM and people that are in really well-developed, committed, 30-year plus long MS relationships, and there's not really a whole lot in between. And a good way to test how serious somebody is about BDSM, being able to discern if they are new to BDSM versus being fake, is to ask them, would you kill somebody for me then, if they say they have no limits? And if they go, whoa, okay, well, I didn't really think about that yet, I wouldn't do that, then they're probably just new to BDSM and don't really understand that even like common sense things do have to be set as limits, because some people will still do them. However, if they say, yes, I would do anything for you, master, Jesus Christ, run away. Run away right now. That is not a safe person to play with. That is a giant red flag, because either they are really not getting that this is like a real thing, not just like fun online role play, or they really genuinely have no sense of boundaries whatsoever, and you can't really trust them to take care of themselves, let alone you, under those circumstances. Number 5 would be constant contact. Now, let's say that somebody has made it through the very low bar of not cold calling you and forcing titles on you, and they do have some like reasonable limits. There are still several things that are worth evaluating. Now, the concept of how much to be in touch with a DS partner is a little bit contentious because everybody has their own personal needs, and I would advocate for anybody, any side of the slash, to make sure it is known what you want and what you are available for. If you are a high-powered attorney that works 70 hours a week and sometimes you have huge caseloads to take up the majority of your time, it's probably not wise to negotiate a relationship with somebody that needs to be texted literally every 30 minutes. But if you do negotiate for, say, I'll talk to you when I'm done with work, I'm available from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. and then the weekends are a little bit more open, and they agree to that, and if they start to act out of what you negotiated for, that is a big red flag, because I think a lot of fake submissives have a tendency to be very emotionally dependent, which I will talk about in a further point in this video in more detail. But with communication, what they do is they need constant contact. They need constant praise. They need you to always be involved with everything. And if you are not texting them at least every half an hour, they are probably having a meltdown. They cannot handle being separated. Even when you say that you're not going to be available, they freak out. They leave you a dozen voice messages. They guilt you for leaving them alone for any period of time. It's pretty much like having a toddler or an infant that can text. Which leads me into my next point, which is number 6, emotional manipulation. Now, this is something that I think is very subtle, because when it comes to our ideas about manipulation, we tend to see it as a very dominant, aggressive thing to do. You can be manipulative even when you're kind of on the bottom end of the power exchange spectrum. And this can make it harder to identify because we are used to looking at it from that aggressive framework, when it can also come from a passive-aggressive or even just an outright passive place. They might guilt trip you for not being available 24/7, even when you didn't negotiate for that, like I mentioned in the last point. They might make you feel bad if you're not able to fully accept their true submission when they do things for you or to you that you didn't actually ask for or want. They'll make you feel bad as the dominant for having boundaries because you might say no to a scene or an idea which they take as a personal attack, because remember, this is just them wanting to have their needs met and you were simply the facilitator of that. They focus entirely on their own emotional experience without ever actually asking you what you like, what you want, or how you feel after a scene. They'll act irrationally jealous and overprotective if you so much as look at another submissive at a munch, and forget it if you have any existing platonic friendships with any other submissives. And they also believe that jealousy is a good and healthy thing for a relationship instead of destructive. So please, if you don't know this already, do not romanticize jealousy. It is not actually a good thing. They might also expect you to be actively jealous and possessive over them, and they will take that as a bad sign if you are not outwardly aggressive towards other dominants when it comes to your ownership of them. Number 7 would be forcing people into play, but it's okay because they're the submissive. Stop me if you've heard this one before. But sometimes when you walk into a munch or during the social hour at a dungeon, you go in, people are just having a nice time, they're chatting about work, renovations on their house they just bought, they're just they're going about life. Nobody's really being actively kinky. You know, you're in t-shirts. You're just having a chill, fun time. And then suddenly, out of somewhere, somebody comes in and they're like, pay attention to me. Do BDSM with me. Here I am. I'm crawling on all fours in this pizza parlor. I'm wearing my dog collar. I'm wearing my leash. I got my puppy hood on. You know, I'm wearing my tutu and my binky, and I've got my stuffy with me, and I'm jumping all around, and I'm suddenly involving everybody in my kink all around me. Now, I am specifically talking about when you are at an otherwise casual social setting. You're at a munch, which is typically strictly supposed to be vanilla presenting because there's going to be vanilla workers there's going to be vanilla people at the restaurant, right? Or during the social hour at a party where there's not a particular theme, you're just there to hang out and be with people in your community and just and there to just not really do anything BDSM in particular, but just hang out with your BDSM friends. And suddenly people come in and they expect you to suddenly start engaging with them in a BDSM fashion. They want you to throw their ball. They want to be called a good boy and to have you walk them around on a leash. They want you to change their diaper. They want you to call them a good girl. Like they insist that the people around them actively participate in their kink, regardless of your boundaries, your relationship negotiations with other people, with your own particular triggers that you might have, because like some people are triggered by things like pet play or DDLG or CGL or whatever else, and like you may not want to be involved with that. And when you say no, when you turn them down, they just cannot handle it. They cannot take being told no. They say that it's kink shaming, that you are not being a good member of the community because everything is so innocent and why can't you just do this for me? And the reason why this bothers me in particular, and I have a little bit of a stick up my ass about it, is if there was a dom or a top that was at a play party, that was not even at a play party, but like a munch at a social event, and they started flogging somebody without negotiating for it first, without talking about it, without warning anybody else around them that it was going to happen, that person would be kicked out and probably blacklisted from future events. But for some reason, when a submissive does it, when a submissive forces play on other people, because role play is a form of play, please do not argue with me about that. I feel like that's fairly obvious. When a submissive does it, it's not treated seriously because, oh, they're just submissive. And we really shouldn't do that. It's a bad double standard. And forcing people to take on the dominant role when they don't want to do that, when they haven't negotiated for it, is also bad, and also, frankly, in my opinion, a form of consent violation. Now, if you do want to be able to freely act out your pet side, your slave side, your little side, your whatever, go to themed parties. Go to areas of the party where people are actively playing. Do not steamroll into a munch like that. Do not steamroll into a random conversation like that with people you don't know. It leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. And that is one of the good things about public kink, is we do have spaces and times and areas where we can publicly display our kink. And I'm not saying that displaying your kink is bad or wrong. I'm saying that requiring others to actively participate in it with you and not being able to hear a no is a really bad sign, and to me is the sign of somebody that doesn't understand healthy boundaries around their submission and around their play more generally. Number 8 actually goes along really closely with this idea, which is, though they like to play with people, they don't necessarily follow through on their rules and expectations. They want to have their cake and then not eat it. I suppose this may be the analogy for this one. But I think how this happens is that faux subs are really always on the chase. They're always looking for that next shiny thing to engage with that holds their interest, that they find appealing at the time. And so for them, establishing things like rules, expectations, and agreements is hot and enjoyable for the moments where you're establishing it. It's because the role play of establishing the rules is like a hot, fun thing for them, and they're not necessarily actually invested in having a long-term DS relationship. They're just there for whatever is hot in the moment, and they can kind of follow through for a while it stays interesting for them. But if they lose that interest, they're just like, whatever, I guess that didn't really matter, and I'm not gonna do that anymore. And what you will oftentimes hear is like, oh, you were serious about that? If you try to call them out on like not following the rules anymore, they'd be like, oh, I didn't realize that was like a real rule. I didn't realize I actually had to follow that one. And forget it. If you're a dom and you want to have rules in your relationship or expectations because they fulfill you, that's just not going to happen, because they're either going to say no during negotiations outright, or they're just going to not ever do it and never follow through and really only keep up with the things that are individually hot for them. Now, keep in mind that this is not the same thing as consensual bratting. People that are doing a consensual bratting type of dynamic actually still want the rules to be there. They like pushing against the rules because they like being reassured of the boundaries of their relationship and the mutual investment that they have with their dominant partner. Also, with a consensual bratting scenario, the dom actively wants it. They like the energy that having a brat submissive brings to their relationship. And so both people are being fulfilled with that. Whereas with a fake submissive, they don't really care about the rules at all. They find rules tedious and annoying, and basically they are always acting in a way that is eroding any chance of having a real solid DS relationship because they're simply not invested enough and they really don't care. Number 9 would be overdependence / using submission as a substitute for adulthood. This is such a big subject that I have made an entire 20-minute video about this previously, so I'm just gonna go ahead and go over the highlights. Now, when you have a healthy DS relationship, there is something of a mutualism there. You both depend on each other, but in a way that constitutes a healthy relationship. You both sort of co-support each other. With fake submissives, what ends up happening is, again, they read being submissive as being allowed to be passive. They read submission as, great, I can find somebody to do my life for me. What a relief. Now, submissives like myself, we do joke like, oh, it's so great to have somebody, do things because my job is so stressful, and I like not having to think about things at the end of the day. I like just being able to be told what to do and go with that. That is very different from, I want to never actively participate in anything. They need a partner that can fix their life for them. Suddenly, this makes dominance not a mutually beneficial two-way street, but something where somebody has suddenly become a full-time caretaker without being paid for it and without negotiating for it. Now, I do want to be careful here because I am not saying that people that have mental illnesses or physical disability or chronic pain shouldn't be part of the BDSM community. I totally do not think that at all. My problem with this lies in the fact that it comes from a place of not being negotiated for and being an expectation because, well, isn't that just what doms do? Last time I checked, doms were not fully certified in-home caretakers and social workers and mental health professionals. They're just normal people, and it is not generally the case that they are equipped to do that volume of things while also taking care of their own life. And it's perfectly fine if you are somebody that has some of those conditions to say, hey, if we get into a DS relationship, I would like help in these areas, or I'm not able to do these things for myself. But you have to be upfront about what that looks like so a dom can give informed consent for what they're going to be doing as part of their relationship with you, instead of basically tricking somebody into suddenly being a full-time caretaker because they weren't actually informed of the realities of somebody's life because they choose to not do certain things for themselves, and they are so passive that they cannot do anything in their own life and are just expecting to find somebody that will do all of that for them, and they think that's what a dom is. Number 10 would be financial manipulation. When it comes to financial manipulation, I think in the BDSM community, we tend to think of like fin doms that don't really have any morals, that just like drain people's bank accounts without thinking twice about it, or fake scammer doms online that are just trying to trick people into giving them their social security number and their credit card information, things like that. But submissives can also be financially manipulative as well. And I talked about this a little bit in a video that I made a long time ago called Should Doms Pay for Their Submissives? Because what can end up happening is some people have this idea that part of the package of being a dom is also being a complete financial provider for a submissive, that a submissive is just supposed to be able to quit their day job and have their dom pay for everything in their life. And that is simply not the case. That is not typical in any respect. And if there is one thing that I could blame mainstream BDSM erotica for more than anything, it is this idea that doms are supposed to be wealthy and wealthy enough to be able to also completely care for another adult with their finances. And so they might have this concept in their heads that doms are essentially glorified sugar daddies that are there to take care of all of their financial needs. And because of that, they guilt and shame doms that aren't able to provide for them in this way, to the point where they call the doms fake because they don't have that level of financial resources. You know, assuming the dom even wants to have a financial component to the relationship in the first place. It could also be a lot more pernicious as well, where the submissive kind of puts on a front that they're really needy and they can't pay for themselves, and oh, my laptop broke, I need it for school, can you pay for that? Oh, my phone broke, I need a new one, can you pay for that? And suddenly the dom ends up paying for more and more in their life to be able to keep their relationship going. It might start out with things like phones and laptops, then it's gas money, then it's car repairs, then it's student loans, then it's help with rent, and suddenly the dom has gotten into a position where they are basically paying for everything in the submissive's life, and the submissive isn't really having to contribute at all. That creates a very difficult scenario for healthy DS, because it has that tension of like the dom feels like they can't leave because this person is financially dependent on them, and that would make them a bad person if they left. And it's just not a good situation for anybody to be in. Anyways, those are all of the red flags that I have to share with you all today when it comes to spotting a fake submissive. Again, please do keep in mind that when I say fake submissive, I mean it in a very loose sense. I mean people that don't understand what submission really is yet. They don't have healthy boundaries yet, rather than just people that are pretending to be submissive when they really aren't. But with all of that being said, I would love to hear from you all down in the comment section below. Any comments you have, any questions, ideas for future videos that you would like me to talk about, or your own red flags as well, if you have had to go through the process of maybe rooting out and identifying people that might not be the best choice for a DS relationship. Also, if you liked this video, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related topics. And finally, if you really enjoyed this video, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is through Patreon. We are currently trying to make our way towards 1,000 patrons, and when that happens, I have tons of exclusive ideas for perks and rewards, things that I can't typically offer on YouTube, things that I haven't really tried before. So if you want to check that out, please do. A link will be down below. If you already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.